Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm gonna talk to you today very briefly about the relationship between, let's say, language and our perceptions. So I'm gonna ask you a question to start with. What do you think is the way that we use to make sense of the world? I think the answer to that is thinking. But how do we think? Well, generally speaking, we use words and images. And to be more specific, I would say that most people are more prone to use words as the instrument by which they think. So there is a theater of thoughts in their minds, and in which they have different ideas combating with one another, trying to take precedence over other ones, and we are trying to pick up the most competent one and put that ideas forward as if it serves as the representation of our ideas and perceptions. But the thing that should be noticed is that it's really hard to think, because you have to be fragmented to a certain big degree so that you can have the tolerance to have different ideas wrestle with one another in your mind. And maybe a tiny minority of people are capable of doing that. One example of that, I suppose, is Dostoevsky, who can come up with different characters in his novels, trying to be at each other's throats all the time, have different ideas. For example, one is theological and his brother is sort of an atheist, and they are trying to make the best argument on their side. So it's quite impressive. But for most people, we imitate the very process of thinking by talking and reading and putting in some materials. And that's why free exchange of ideas is so important in a civil society, because that's the way in which people put their finger on the problems that they all care about and lay out their arguments according to their perceptual abilities and see where they disagree, where they agree, then come to a consensus. That is the fundamental mechanism by which we solve problems in our society. And that's why language has a pristine value in that sense, I think, to help us to build not only a personal narrative, but a grand narrative for us to better the society in the long run. But apart from that, I think there's always a limit to our language, because we don't know exactly to what degree is our language tantamount to our thinking process. Maybe it's not, because perception is so hard to disentangle and human language is so limited. Let me give an example, and it's also an example that's inspired by Bear. He talked to me that, now let's see that in English we describe certain things, generally speaking, by using a certain tense. For example, a thing happening in the past, we use past tense. I was a primary school student, right? If I've been doing something till now, well, we should use past perfect tense. I've been learning English for years. If it's something that I've been planning to do, well, I will use future simple tense, like I will go abroad, things like that. It means that we should insert in some sense of a certain time framework in our language system to make our thinking more reasonable and more valid. And partly I think it's because we are living in a three-dimensional universe where we don't have a direct perception of time with which we can have maybe a omniscient view of our life. And if we have that, maybe we can use our language subconsciously by adopting time framework without a conscious effort of using that. So I think it's a representation of the idea that maybe our perceptions are somehow restricted by our language precisely because it's flaws. And as some people would like to argue that some philosophical questions in the final analysis is because of the limitation of our human language, because there is something that is unutterable, but we are trying so hard like mad to use certain words that are so imperfect to describe something unutterable. So maybe that's in vain in the final analysis. And it's excruciating to say the least when you're learning a new language, when you're getting hands on something that you don't know. It's masochism. But the very attempt of doing so is an imitation of wisdom and the divine. And if we lose that, we lose everything that you can imagine and you can't. Because that's the way in which we chase something valuable. That is the thing with which we move from point A to point B, and we assume with a certain degree of confidence that point B is better than point A, and we use language, words, ideas to construe that, to present a more valuable picture to us and to the rest of people. That is the fundamental mechanism by which we have ideas, meaning in our life. And that's why language is imperfect, but it's still something what we should take good care of. So don't let it go. Cherish it with all our heart. That's that. Thank you.